Thank you for watching Ahmed Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Budnam. Following are the world news by American, European, and Canadian channels. African, Asian channels and all news agencies have reported the same news. Now the headlines. Congress members are working hard to avoid partial shutdown of U.S. government. Kate Middleton announced the cancer. First Muslim American appointed for federal appeal court. A terrorist attack in Moscow by ISIS. Differences between Israel and America over the Gaza situation. Anthony Blinken met Netanyahu. Palestinian death count 32,000. Russian-China veto in United Nations. Russian missiles destroyed power plant in Ukraine. Energy stopped for 1 million people. Trump social media company merger. Wall Street was mixed yesterday. The Dow Jones Industrial dropped. S&P went down. Mr. Biden and his students loan. Nasdaq went up. Now the news in detail. Kidney transplant to the human. Now the news in detail.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, Congress works to avoid a partial government shutdown. But could it cost the House Speaker his gavel?
Princess Kate Middleton announces she has cancer after weeks of speculation about her health.
And the first Muslim American nominated to be on a federal appeals court hits a roadblock, with both Republicans and Democrats voicing concerns.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Dobner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation.
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the legendary Mississippi River, travelers explore Civil War battlefields and historic riverside towns. Aboard our fleet of American riverboats, you can experience local culture and cuisine and discover the music and history of the mighty Mississippi. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The federal government is just hours away from partially shutting down as Capitol Hill scrambles to finalize its $1.2 trillion spending deal.
The bill would keep the lights on, but could also cost the Speaker his job. Congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins is here with more on the deal, and White House Republicans now face the threat of yet another chaotic leadership surge. Lisa, let's start with this shutdown deadline. We're just 6 hours away. Where do things stand?
All right, the House passed this bill that would fund the rest of government. 70% of government agencies need funding or they'll start shutting down this weekend. They passed that barely today, just 5 or 6 votes to spare. The Senate now needs to act by midnight. Here is at this minute-to-minute decisions being made in the Senate, and right now, Amna, it looks like we may, in fact, get to that midnight deadline without this getting through the Senate. Senator Susan Collins has just said that. Other staffers confirming the two sides are not agreeing over amendments that they want to vote on for this. Everyone knows amendments won't pass. This is all election year symbolic votes, but they can't agree on it. Adding to this, Senator Susan Collins, top Republican appropriator, her mother's funeral is tomorrow in Maine. She's never missed a vote, so it's not a factor in what happens, but it is adding to the pressure around all of this. Right now, it looks like we're being able to do that, and it's an election year. Speaker Johnson, he is someone who talks about the Bible. I hope he's read the book of Job, because he's having so much political difficulty and challenges. We'll see how he gets through it.
We will see. Lisa Desjardins covering a busy Friday on Capitol Hill. Lisa, thank you.
In the day's other headlines, gunfire erupted at a rock concert outside Moscow today. Russia's lead security service reported 40 people were killed and more than 100 wounded. Video showed the Crocus City Hall ablaze before part of the roof collapsed. News accounts said gunmen in combat fatigues fired automatic weapons and threw explosives. Russian officials called it a terror attack. Ukraine denied it had anything to do with the shootings. A tense meeting in Tel Aviv today spotlighted the strains in U.S.-Israeli relations over the war in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but afterward, the Prime Minister again insisted on invading Rafah, the last Hamas stronghold.
I told him that I greatly appreciate that we've been standing together in the war, but I also said that we have no way to defeat Hamas without going into Rafah and eliminating the rest of the battalions there. And I told him that I hope we will do it with the support of the USA, but if we have to, we will do it alone.
Later at the airport, Blinken said the U.S. and Israel still share the goal of defeating Hamas, but they differ sharply on the strategy.
A major military ground operation in Rafah is not the way to do it. It risks killing more civilians. It risks wreaking greater havoc with the provision of humanitarian assistance. It risks further isolating Israel around the world and jeopardizing its long-term security and standing.
The Tel Aviv meeting came as the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza reported the death toll has passed 32,000, with more than 74,000 injured. Russia and China vetoed a U.S.-sponsored resolution supporting a ceasefire in Gaza in a vote today at the UN Security Council. Ambassadors from Moscow and Beijing said the resolution did not specifically demand a halt to the fighting and would let Israel act with impunity.
This would definitively close the door when it comes to discussions about the need for a ceasefire in Gaza. This would free the hands of Israel, and it would result in all of Gaza and its entire population having to face destruction, devastation, or expulsion. We are not guided by what is convenient for Washington and its satellites.
In response, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said that Russia and China opposed the resolution because it also condemned the Hamas attack on Israel that killed 1,200 people last October. More than 1 million people in Ukraine lost power today after a sweeping Russian attack on the electrical grid. At least 60 drones and 90 rockets rained down across the country, killing at least 5 people. Cell phone video captured missiles striking a dam in Zaporizhzhia that feeds power to a nuclear plant. Officials said the dam was not in danger of breaching. Back in this country, former President Donald Trump's social media company completed a merger that stands to greatly increase his wealth. He'll own the majority stake, and his shares could be worth more than $3 billion. But company rules bar Mr. Trump from selling any of that stock for 6 months, so he cannot use it to cover a fraud judgment of $454 million that's due on Monday. And on Wall Street, stocks gave ground after 3 straight days of record closes. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 305 points to close below 39,476. The Nasdaq rose 27 points, but the S&P 500 fell 7. And still to come on the news hour, medical history is made after a pig kidney is transplanted into a human. David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart weigh in on the week's political headlines. And rock star Lenny Kravitz on his new album and international tour.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, announced this afternoon that she's undergoing treatment for cancer. The news came amid rampant and often irresponsible speculation about her in the British press and beyond. It also came after missteps by the royal family itself about her whereabouts and condition. She revealed the news in a video message shot earlier this week by the BBC studios at Windsor Castle.
In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous. The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy, and I'm now in the early stages of that treatment. This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
For more, I'm joined from London by Jenny Bond, a journalist with deep insights into the royal family. Thank you for joining us. As you know, the princess hadn't been seen in public since December. In the weeks since then, it's been filled with conspiracy theories and wild speculation about her absence.
President Biden's nomination of the first Muslim American to a federal appeals court has come under intense criticism and appears to be in peril. Laura Barone-Lopez has more. Laura?
That's right, Jeff. President Biden's nominee to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, Adil Manji, is a veteran litigator unanimously rated well-qualified by the American Bar Association. But he's faced a barrage of attacks from Republican senators, which the White House says amounts to an Islamophobic smear campaign.
Do you believe that Zionist settler colonialism was a provocation that justified Hamas's atrocity against Jews in Israel?
Do you condemn the atrocities of the Hamas terrorists?
Yes, that's what I was about to address, Senator.
Is there any justification for those atrocities?
Senator, I'll repeat myself. The events of October 7th were a horror. I have no patience, none, for any attempts to justify or defend those events.
And conservative outside groups have launched ads baselessly labeling Manji as anti-Semitic, despite his nomination being endorsed by more than a dozen Jewish organizations. To discuss this, I'm joined by former federal judge Timothy K. Lewis, who was appointed to the same Circuit Court of Appeals as Manji by then...
My pleasure and my honor. Thank you for having me.
In an historic first, a kidney from a genetically modified pig has been successfully transplanted into a human. As William Brangham reports, the technique used in the surgery last weekend is a big step forward and could have wide implications.
The patient here is a 62-year-old black man whose kidneys were failing, and he was on dialysis for years. This kind of human-to-animal transplant, known as xenotransplantation, is one that researchers hope to do more of because there aren't nearly enough human organs for the thousands of people in need. But putting animal tissue into a human body is complicated. The body often rejects foreign tissue. So in this case, scientists removed several genes from the pig that can trigger that rejection. To help us understand this brave new world, we are joined by Dr. Leonardo Riella. He's the medical director for kidney transplantation at Massachusetts General Hospital, where this historic event took place. Dr. Riella, so good to have you on the program. Congratulations on this historic, so much, and again, congratulations on this historic breakthrough.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
With House Republicans facing yet another fight over who will lead their conference and a host of other political stories driving this week's news, we turn to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That's New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor for the Washington Post. Great to see you all as always. So House Speaker Mike Johnson is facing the first direct threat to his speakership after Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene filed what's known as a motion to vacate against him today for working with Democrats to fund the government. Jonathan, this resolution is not privileged, which in plain English means the House doesn't have to vote on it until Marjorie Taylor Greene says so, which effectively means that Speaker Johnson has this axe hanging over his head. How do you see this playing out?
Well, the Speaker has had this axe hanging over his head since the moment he got the job. And when he got the job, the conventional wisdom was because he's from that faction of the far right of the House, he will have a honeymoon period, that he will be able to do things that then Speaker McCarthy wasn't able to do, or the things that made him lose his job. And this is where those personal relationships come into play.
Jonathan Capehart and David Brooks, great conversation. Thank you both for this. Lenny Kravitz has been busy. A new single out today from his album set for release in May, and an international tour this summer. And earlier this month, he earned a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I spoke with Kravitz in Los Angeles, and we visited some of his old haunts for our arts and culture series, Canvas. Lenny Kravitz seamlessly blends rock, funk, is scheduled for release in May, ahead of a world tour kicking off this summer. And online, you can hear more from Lenny Kravitz on the inspiration behind one of my favorite songs, that's I Belong to You, and that's on our YouTube channel.
And finally tonight, Charles Duhigg is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and best-selling author whose latest book seeks to unlock the secret language of communication. Here, he shares his brief but spectacular take on connecting with others.
The goal of a conversation is not to convince someone else that you're right. It's not even to come to agreement or find a common ground. The only goal of a conversation is to understand each other. So my relationship with small talk is that I used to be terrified of it until I started doing this research about how to have conversations, in which I learned the key for small talk is to get deep as fast as possible. The best way to get deep with someone is the more we allow our own instincts to come out. And the truth is, we were born to connect with each other. We just have to learn how to listen to that. My name is Charles Duhigg, and this is my brief but spectacular take on super communication.
And as always, you can watch more brief but spectacular videos online at pbs.org/newshour/brief.
A late news update now to the shooting at a rock concert in Moscow that killed 40 people, according to Russia's security service. U.S. officials tell the NewsHour that the U.S. warned Russian authorities earlier this month that a terror attack was imminent in Russia. On Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin labeled that American caution a, quote, blatant attempt to destabilize Russian society. And we invite you to tune into Washington Week with The Atlantic tonight for a look at the growing tensions between the U.S. and Israel over the war in Gaza.
And on PBS News Weekend tomorrow, we take a closer look at the working conditions of migrant farm laborers and their role in the U.S. economy. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Navaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. Thanks for spending part of your evening with us, and have a great weekend.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
It was like an aha moment. This is...
Watch Zarka Camp Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
ISIS claims responsibility for a shooting rampage and arson on a concert hall near Moscow that has killed at least 60 people and injured more than 100. It's the most deadly terrorist attack in Russia in more than a decade. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once again shrugs off calls from Washington to scrap plans to invade Rafah, Netanyahu declaring Israel will do it alone if necessary. The Spanish region of Catalonia battles its worst drought on record. Farmers bear the brunt of the catastrophe as the dry conditions leave them unable to make ends meet. We'll bring you a special report. Hello, thanks for joining us here on France 24. Our top story, the Islamic State group says it's behind a shooting rampage at a popular concert venue near the Russian capital that has left at least 60 people dead and more than 100 wounded. In a statement posted by its Amak news agency, the group said it attacked a large gathering of Christians in the city of Krasnokros on the outskirts of Moscow. US authorities say they have intelligence confirming the claims. Russia has launched a manhunt for the gunman involved in what is being described as the most deadly terrorist attack in Russia in over a decade. Here's France 24's Nick Rushworth with the latest.
People hid for cover in the concert hall as gunmen opened fire at around 8 p.m., killing and injuring dozens of people at the Crocus City Hall near Moscow. Despite the panic, some people filmed as the attackers shot concertgoers. At least 4 heavily armed individuals fired at point-blank range in the concert hall and lobby area. Russian news reports said that assailants threw explosives, triggering a massive blaze at the hall.
We saw the shooting. There are many dead and wounded. A fire started there now.
The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the attack. Frontier groups that Islamic State fighters attacked a large gathering of Christians in the Moscow suburb of Krasnokurs, killed and wounded hundreds of people, causing extensive damage at the scene before returning safely to their bases. This is the deadliest attack in Russia in years.
A tragedy has taken place. Firefighters are working in the Crocus building. There's a lot of fire. Everything else will be clear once the firefighters finish their work.
Security has been tightened at Moscow's airports, railway stations, and the capital's underground system. Moscow's mayor cancelled all mass gatherings, and theatres and museums are shut for the weekend. Other Russian regions also tightened security.
Let's move to other world news now. European leaders have wrapped up the second and final day of a summit in Brussels. The war in Ukraine was again at the centre of talks. The bloc is set to impose a tariff of up to 50% on Russian grain imports. It comes a day after leaders agreed to a plan to use the proceeds from frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. Jenny Shin reports.
Day 2 of the European summit in Brussels, with leaders debating new ways to bolster support for Ukraine. It comes as the Kremlin changed its tone in recent comments, saying Russia is in a state of war, a statement that the EU Council chief says shows the importance of the bloc's collective defence.
They have now recognized that what they're waging against Ukraine is not a special military operation. It's a war. This declaration shows that the discussions that we had yesterday on Ukraine and the preparation for European defense strategy is more relevant than ever.
The bloc is looking to choke off the revenue Russia uses to finance its offensive by slapping tariffs on grain and other imports into the bloc. The EU Commission says the move would make Russian imports commercially unviable.
We do not want Russia to have any kind of revenues from the EU agri-food market, for example, the grain market. We do not want Russian grain to influence our grain market and the agriculture in the European Union at all.
The EU has already imposed several rounds of sanctions on Moscow, currently holding some 210 billion euros of Russian assets. Now, the bloc has endorsed plans to tap into those frozen funds to boost arms and ammunition for Kyiv. This as the flow of aid from Washington has stalled, and Moscow's forces continue to press hard on the front lines.
While as European leaders continue to mull over how best to make Russia pay for the war, Ukraine continues to grapple with attacks from Moscow. The White House has condemned Russia's massive wave of strikes on Ukraine on Friday, calling on Republicans in Congress to end the, quote, inexcusable blocking of military aid to Kyiv. Almost 90 missiles and more than 60 drones fell on Ukraine, damaging dozens of energy facilities, including power stations. At least 5 people were killed.
Across southern and eastern Ukraine, more than 1 million people woke up Friday without power. Overnight, Russia launched its largest ever attack on Ukraine's energy facilities, firing around 150 missiles and drones. Ukrainian officials calling it an attempt to cripple the country's electricity and heating network. Residents in Kharkiv struggle to cope.
I need fuel for the generator to at least be able to get some water for the pump, also to have power to keep running my business, to continue working somehow.
There's no cell signal. We need to get in touch with elderly people, see what's going on. Russian missiles hit homes as well. Here in Zaporizhia, families watched as rescuers searched for adults and children trapped under debris.
There was so much flying above us. I couldn't comprehend it. I had one goal, to ensure that my child lived. I rescued him from the rubble.
As the bombs fell, Russia decided to finally call its action in Ukraine a war. For the first time Friday, the Kremlin explicitly said such. As Vladimir Putin celebrates securing another 6 years as Russia's president, attacks across the border have sharply escalated. He has vowed to continue his full-scale war on Ukraine.
Let's focus on the war in Gaza now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has once again rebuffed calls from the US's top diplomats to call off plans for a ground invasion in Rafah. Netanyahu said Friday that we will do it alone if necessary. In a meeting with Netanyahu in Tel Aviv, Antony Blinken cautioned that Israel risks further global isolation if it follows through with the offensive. It's the latest warning from the US over the city where more than 1 million people are sheltering. Charlie James has the latest.
America's top diplomat arrived in Israel Friday with a goal: to meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and convince him to abandon a ground offensive on Rafah. But Netanyahu told Antony Blinken to his face that wasn't going to happen.
We have no way to defeat Hamas without getting into Rafah and eliminating the battalions that are left there. I told him that I hope to do that with the support of the United States. But if we need to, we will do it alone.
Even after the meeting, Blinken continues to publicly pressure Israel to stay out of Rafah, insisting there are better options.
A major military ground operation in Rafah is not the way to do it. It risks killing more civilians. It risks wreaking greater havoc with the provision of humanitarian assistance. It risks further isolating Israel.
But Netanyahu stands ready to defy his nation's biggest ally and military supporter. And while Blinken also pushes for a ceasefire and more aid into Gaza, people inside Rafah have little faith in him.
With his 6 previous visits, he did not achieve anything new for the Palestinian people, nor did he contribute at all to the ceasefire.
His excuses are worse than his sins. He asked Israel for a ceasefire while also providing Israel with weapons.
The U.S. suffered another failure Friday when Russia and China vetoed a U.S.-sponsored UN resolution calling for an immediate and sustained ceasefire. Hope now rests in Doha, where top intelligence officials from the U.S., Israel, Egypt, and Qatar are meeting to hammer out details of a proposed ceasefire for hostages deal. Hamas has so far rejected previous offers the negotiations have produced.
While UNICEF has recently warned that among the thousands of Gazans cramped into Rafah, children would be hurt the most by a major military offensive there. The situation for children across the enclave remains critical. The World Health Organization says many are dying from the combined effects of malnutrition and disease, as Liam McGuinn explains.
Reduced to skin and bone, Feder is just one of thousands of children in Gaza suffering from severe malnutrition and starvation. His family simply can't get hold of the supplies needed to feed him.
Feder has cystic fibrosis, a disease that requires a lot of care. We should be careful with his milk, treatment and food, but we've been at war for 5 months now. Nothing is available anymore. His condition has deteriorated day by day until it reached the point of dehydration.
On Thursday, the World Health Organization said that many children in the region are dying from the combined effects of malnutrition and disease. The WHO is trying to combat this by setting up stabilization and nutrition centers across Gaza. Despite that, one doctor says that it's getting worse by the day.
These hospitals, for the last couple of weeks, are seeing high number of severely acute malnutrition with complications. Unfortunately, today, myself, I saw 6 children with severely acute malnutrition with complications.
On Thursday, the WHO Director General said that only a substantial increase in aid deliveries to the enclave could help to prevent famine. While earlier this week, UN Rights Chief Volker Turk accused Israel of blocking aid and said that they may be using starvation as a method of war.
We end in Spain, where Catalonia remains under a state of emergency as it faces its worst drought on record. In some areas of the Spanish region, it has not rained in over 3 years. Water restrictions have been extended to Barcelona and the surrounding areas, affecting more than 6 million people. Farmers are among the worst hit, having to cut down consumption by 80%. France 24's Down to Earth team sent us this report.
For generations before them, this fertile valley had been a source of prosperity. Jordi's apple orchard, covering 20 hectares, was passed on to him by his father. Juan Marc inherited 70 hectares of cereal crops, but successive droughts and severe water restrictions could mark the end of the family business.
This year, I won't be able to sow anything, or perhaps just sunflowers or sorghum. If only they gave me some water, I'd be able to sow and keep on working. But without water, I can't do anything here. Nothing will grow.
Jordi is the head of a farmers association, counting 5,000 members in the region.
If in the next 4 to 5 years we don't find a solution for the farming sector, we'll have to close shop and maybe work in the tourism industry. They have water.
Both cities and rural areas share the same water supply, 7 reservoirs across Catalonia. Jordi depends on the Sau reservoir. The site of a church once underwater has made headlines around the world. It has dropped to 1% of its capacity.
These reservoirs help regulate supply, but a large share of water goes to Barcelona. Given that the city, businesses, and the tourism industry are the priority, other sectors and us farmers come last.
Jordi began working at the farm at the age of 18 and has since expanded production to several apple varieties, harvesting 700 tons per year. Shortages have since forced him to reconsider his water usage.
Now we have drip irrigation systems that slowly drip water at the root. We have sensors in the soil, but I can't do more than that. It already tells me precise water and humidity levels.
Beneath the barren land, seawater is also creeping in, yet another consequence of recurrent droughts. Aquifer levels have dropped so low that the Mediterranean Sea is silently gaining ground.
Nothing grows here. It's like the desert.
Both farmers blame authorities for failing to anticipate the long-lasting drought. It will need to rain for 70 consecutive days for groundwater levels to return to normal.
Well, that's it from us. Thanks for your company and stay tuned to France 24.
Every day, the economy shapes our lives. Globalization, the financial...
Princess Kate's shocking announcement about her health.
It has been an incredibly tough couple of months.
What she revealed and her message to the public. Terrifying moments inside a Moscow concert hall. The mass shooting that's killed dozens of people. Also on this Friday night, we are in Montreal on the eve of Brian Mulroney's state funeral, where his family is finding strength.
If they're going to show up, so will we.
Plus fond memories from one of the former Prime Minister's childhood friends. And stormy times. It's spring, but winter refuses to leave two provinces.
Global National with Donna Friesen, reporting tonight from Montreal.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are in Montreal outside Notre Dame Basilica ahead of the state funeral for former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, which will take place here tomorrow. But we begin tonight with breaking news about the British royal family. The Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, has revealed she has cancer. There has been intense speculation about her health and even wild conspiracy theories since she had abdominal surgery in January. Today, she took charge of the narrative, releasing a video. Here's part of it.
The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy, and I'm now in the early stages of that treatment.
Our Europe Bureau Chief, Crystal Demansing, is outside Buckingham Palace tonight. Crystal, this is a deeply personal thing for the princess to reveal. What more is she saying? What's been the reaction?
Donna, the announcement from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was a shock, partly because she is just 42 years old. There was a lot of pressure on her and the royal family because she had been out of the public eye for so many months. Her last official public appearance was at Christmas.
In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous.
Typically, we don't get very much information from the palace about royal personal lives, but this is the second cancer diagnosis. In February, King Charles shared his diagnosis in a personal message to the public.
It has been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family, but I've had a fantastic medical team who've taken great care of me, for which I'm so grateful.
Again, we got another personal message. Take a listen to what the princess had to say about her husband's support and finding out she had cancer.
Having William by my side is a great source of comfort and reassurance too. This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
Kate goes on to say that she and William have needed time to explain everything to their three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and to reassure them that she says she is doing okay. Now, we still don't know exactly what prompted the surgery that the Princess of Wales had in January, and we don't know what type of cancer she is being treated for currently, but maybe with the video message and the announcement, the family will be given a little bit of privacy to head off and recover, and that is what Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has asked for. Donna?
All right, Crystal Demansing outside Buckingham Palace in London tonight, thanks. There is breaking news from Moscow. Armed attackers have stormed a theater in the Russian capital, an attack officials describe as terrorism, and late today the so-called Islamic State claimed responsibility, and a warning some of the video emerging is disturbing. Heavily armed gunmen opened fire inside the concert hall. They detonated explosives. Russian state media says at least 40 people are dead, more than 140 injured. At one point, the building appeared to be engulfed in flames. Jeff Simple reports on what happened.
Cell phone video captured the first frantic moments. At least 4 gunmen are seen shooting their way through the entrance of the Crocus City Hall concert venue. Inside, hundreds had gathered for a concert that was about to begin. Hearing commotion, some appear confused and calmly get up to leave. Then that calm turns to panic. Some take cover under their seats. Video too graphic to broadcast shows the attackers shooting screaming people point blank. Hundreds of others scrambled out of the hall. But as they tried to escape, suddenly the building burst into flames. Russian state TV reports the gunmen first opened fire with automatic weapons, then threw a grenade or an incendiary bomb, which started the fire. The regional governor called it a terrible tragedy. His interview interrupted as the venue's roof partially collapsed.
The images are just horrible.
The attack comes after a warning from U.S. officials earlier this month that urged Americans in Moscow to avoid crowded places, citing intelligence of an imminent attack. The Russian president dismissed that security alert as a provocation and American blackmail. Moscow's mayor canceled all mass gatherings in the city for this weekend, after what appears to be the worst terror attack in Russia in 2 decades. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
More than 1 million households in Ukraine are without power after what officials there say is the largest attack on the country's energy infrastructure in 2 years of war. More than 150 Russian missiles and drones are said to have struck facilities across the country, including Ukraine's largest hydroelectric dam. At least 3 people have been killed. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is again pleading for more help, saying Russian missiles have no delays, unlike aid packages to Ukraine. Global News has learned members of Canada's elite Special Forces Unit are in Haiti. Members of the Joint Task Force 2, the highly trained counter-terrorism unit, have been preparing to deploy for the past 2 weeks. Sources tell Global News some are now at the Canadian Embassy in Port-au-Prince. Canadian Special Forces have been deployed to Haiti before, and to countries like Afghanistan, where they've helped evacuate embassy staff. Here in Montreal, the state funeral for former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney takes place tomorrow. Hundreds of people have been paying their respects. Eric Sorensen is outside St. Patrick's Basilica. Eric.
Donna, tonight marks the last of the public visitations to see the casket of Brian Mulroney, his body lying in repose here at St. Patrick's Basilica.
For 4 days, Neela Mulrooney and the rest of the family were determined to greet everyone who came to pay their respects to Brian Mulrooney. Those who knew him personally, like Caroline O'Connor, who socialized with the Mulrooneys years ago.
He left politics. It wasn't under the best of circumstances, but people remember all the good he did for this country.
And those too young to know him at all. Jacques Wang hopes to be a history teacher.
I think Mr. Mulrooney's work and legacy deserves to be taught in our curriculum.
That legacy includes groundbreaking policies on free trade, the environment, even taxation, like the GST.
But he didn't get a lot of recognition for it at the time.
Derek Burney was Mulrooney's ambassador in Washington and will be an honorary pallbearer at the funeral.
I'm immensely pleased that he's finally getting recognition for his achievements right across the board, across the whole political spectrum. I mean, he would have loved it.
Over the last 3 weeks, Mulrooney's political accomplishments have been recounted, but so too the personal side that many didn't know about.
I heard about what he was like as a person, remembering everyone's names and being so personable. I think that's touched a lot of people.
As Mulrooney's body lies in repose for one last day, Carol McCormick remembers singing for him on his 80th birthday.
It just comes back and say he was a good man, and he really tried very, very hard for Canada.
Tomorrow morning, a funeral cortege will escort the casket of Mr. Mulrooney from the St. Patrick's Basilica to the Notre Dame Basilica for one final public goodbye before a private family burial in Montreal. Donna?
Eric, thanks. A little later, Brian Mulrooney's eldest son, Ben, tells me what the last few days have been like for his family. A spring snowstorm has hit Ontario and could affect millions of people across central and eastern Canada. Parts of Ontario are under snowfall warnings. Toronto could get up to 20 centimeters of snow by tonight, the most snow that's fallen all year. Weather warnings are also in place in parts of Quebec and into the Maritimes, as well as the northeastern U.S. Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell is with me. Anthony, what's it like in Toronto now, and what's coming?
Donna, it has been snowing all day, but it's definitely picked up in intensity within the last hour or so. Already about 10 centimeters of fluffy powder across some parts of the city, and that was enough to snarl traffic a really slow go on some of the major roads, including numerous accidents. We may have another 10 centimeters before all is done here in the city. Next up, it's southern Quebec, and this storm is intensifying. So for Montreal, right on the edge, close to 10 centimeters in the forecast through Saturday morning. The eastern townships, near 30 centimeters forecasted. And then it's off to New Brunswick, where this really will shine. 50 to 80 centimeters of snow in a 24-hour period through central New Brunswick, and that will likely be enough to shut down some roads and highways. It'll all clear out by Sunday morning, and the snow will start melting almost immediately as the sun shines this weekend and temperatures begin to rise. Donna?
All right, Anthony Farnell in snowy Toronto, thanks. Another ceasefire resolution rejected. Coming up, which countries shot down the proposal at the UN and the fallout. This is St. Patrick's Basilica in downtown Montreal, where people have been paying their respects to the late Brian Mulrooney. Next, his son Ben tells me how his mother is coping. Welcome back to Montreal. This is the fourth day the Mulrooney family has been standing in the receiving line, first in Ottawa, then here, welcoming hundreds of people who wanted to pay their respects to former Prime Minister Brian Mulrooney. Earlier today, Ben Mulrooney, Brian's eldest son, stepped away from the receiving line in St. Patrick's Basilica for a few minutes to speak to me. I started by asking him how the last few days have been. We've watched you in the receiving line be hugged by, shake the hands of hundreds of people. Where are you finding strength in that?
Finding from my mom. Yeah. It was my mom. Originally, the thought was that this was going to be an all-day affair, and therefore we would take shifts in line. And I think within the first 5 minutes, she said, why would I leave if these people are taking time out of their days to brave the cold, sometimes travel from a different city, to come share their memories? Why wouldn't I be here to listen? Why wouldn't I be here? And in a lot of cases, she's consoling them. And so it wasn't very hard for us to just say, all right, we're going to, if they're going to show up, so will we. I think she's good. I think she's okay. She's as good as she can be. I think anybody who's experienced this level of grief can appreciate that it comes in waves. Helps if you keep busy, and we're very busy and have been since my dad passed. I have to assume that in those quiet moments right before bed, she's having a tougher time than she is right now. But we were there with him at the end as a family. We've been together almost every moment since. We will be with him when we lay him to rest.
They were married for 51 years, coming up to 52, right? Mm-hmm. They were life partners. And almost every time we saw your father, your mother was next to him. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of their relationship?
My mom would be the first to say that they weren't two people, they were one. They acted in concert. She has tremendous instincts on people. She knows how to read them. My dad had a very generous spirit, to a fault sometimes, where people who did not deserve his kindness would get his kindness. She would have to be there to remind him, let's just take a step back for a moment. She would be there to help him remember this occasion or that, or make a link between two people. And so between the two of them, that was the force of nature. That was the alchemy. That was the lightning in the bottle.
Did he ever say that he wouldn't have been the politician he was, the leader he was, without her?
Oh, he said he would have been the most successful senior partner at his law firm, were it not for her. For him to take that next step, for him to achieve that goal that he had since he was a kid, he wouldn't have been able to do it without her.
When you're receiving people who are coming to pay their respects, what are you learning about your father through that process?
Well, my brother refers to it as bandwidth, the amount of the lift that he was capable of while being prime minister, while being a father, a mother, an uncle, responsible for so many people, so many files for an entire country for a certain period. The fact that he still had time to do all the things that we're hearing from these people, the phone calls, the letters, showing up, being there, listening, celebrating, cheering them on. For him to have done it for so long, at such a sustained pace for so many people, that I think is the thing that impresses us the most.
One of the grandchildren I know is named Neela. It's the family connection, obviously. There's 16 grandchildren, right?
There's Neela, there's Brian, yes. And then Neela's 8th birthday yesterday. And so once we were done here, the whole family went to my mom's apartment. We had a pizza party. We sang happy birthday, we had some cake. And then one of the other granddaughters' birthdays is on Sunday. And we'll be having a birthday party then as well.
How much of a role did your father play in the plans for his funeral? Some people have very precise ideas of what they want in their funeral, their celebration of life. Did your father do that?
There were broad strokes where he had certain songs he might have wanted to hear and certain people he hoped would speak. But there was no grand plan. But the good thing is my dad oftentimes had very set ideas as to what he would want, and then my mother would do whatever she wanted, and then he would realize that she was right.
Would you characterize tomorrow as a celebration of life?
Yes, it's going to be a celebration. There's going to be a lot of emotion. I hope to God there's some funny moments, because I find that cuts through the sadness for me, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to make it through the whole thing, but that's just for me.
And your dad would like a laugh with me?
He loved the laugh. He loved, and especially when it came from his family, he loved telling a joke, and he did not mind if he was the butt of the joke, because it was always done with love.
Yeah.
Always done with love.
Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Still ahead, why a United Nations resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza was rejected again. At the UN in New York, another resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza has failed. This one was led by the US, which has vetoed 3 previous resolutions. This time it was Russia and China who stepped in, leading to some testy exchanges, as Reggie Cicchini reports.
The international outcry to do more to protect civilians in Gaza has only grown more intense, while the desperation from those who can't help themselves is often only quieted by death.
Every day without a ceasefire leads to more needless suffering.
The United States using the word ceasefire for the first time in a resolution to the UN Security Council.
Those against. The draft resolution has not been adopted.
Only for Russia and China to veto the plan.
If you do this, you will cover yourselves in disgrace.
They would rather see us fail than to see this council succeed.
The diplomatic push was matched on the ground in Israel, with the U.S. Secretary of State again meeting Benjamin Netanyahu, urging a path to a truce that would see Israeli hostages released and a request to halt a planned military operation in Rafah. Netanyahu says he hears U.S. concerns about protecting or moving civilians, but says they will go into Rafah even if they have no U.S. support.
It risks further isolating Israel around the world and jeopardizing its long-term security and standing.
The White House has expressed deep concern and is growing increasingly frustrated with Israel, but at this point, it's unclear if Washington can deter its ally. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Next, we hear from one of former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney's oldest friends about the little guy from Baie-Comeau. We're back from Montreal in a moment. Welcome back to Montreal. We are outside Notre Dame Basilica. Brian Mulroney was proud of his roots and often called himself the little guy from Baie-Comeau. He was born and raised in the remote mill town on Quebec's North Shore. Mike Armstrong went there this week and spoke with one of Mulroney's oldest friends, who says the former Prime Minister never forgot where he came from.
How many kids are up and down this street back then?
Oh my God, hundreds.
Growing up in Baie-Comeau back in the 1940s and 50s, Walter Bisson says the homes on Champlain Street were owned by the local mill. To live in one, you had to have a job and a family. Well, Walter's buddy Brian lived at 99, and he knocked at the Mulroney family's door often.
Right there. Actually, back door. Oh, back door. And it's always better to go to the back door with Mrs. Mulroney anyway, because you're sure they're getting a nice cookie and a glass of milk. So you make sure of that.
Walter knew Brian as far back as he can remember. He figures they were friends as toddlers, and Brian was an easy kid to be friends with.
Brian was always there to help somebody. He was one of these kids that, when you're at the age of 6, 7, 8, he could be silly, but he was more serious than silly.
Now, the other way Brian stood out was ambition. Even at 12 and 13 years old, Brian had plans.
Brian used to say, geez, something. I like politics. Come on, Mulroney, for God's sake, a bunch of crooked lawyers, And he said, I never do say that, but I might be a lawyer. I said, I'll still call you a crooked lawyer. You're a lawyer.
Now, Walter planned on attending the funeral. In fact, in his final conversation with his old friend Brian, he promised he would. But Walter changed his mind when the city of Baie-Comeau announced it would remember its most famous son at the church the Mulroney family used to attend.
I'm not going to Montreal because this is where Mulroney would want me to be. So this is why I'm here. The place where he was born. Church he was baptized in. I should be here.
Well, from those early days, in this case the Rotary Club, the two men were lifelong friends. They spoke by phone every month or so for about 60 years. Walter says he'll miss those conversations, and already misses that voice.
I could see him, and he could see the laughter. How are you doing, Walt? How's everything? He was really full of it. He cared at all. He really cared.
Walter has always considered himself lucky, not because he got to know a prime minister, but because he got to be friends with his buddy, Brian. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Baie-Comeau, Quebec.
I'm hosting live coverage of the former Prime Minister's state funeral here in Montreal tomorrow morning, starting at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific, right here on Global. That is Global National for this Friday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the streets of downtown Montreal, some of which will be closed tomorrow as the casket of the former Prime Minister moves to Notre Dame Basilica for his state funeral. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.